They thought the shrapnel had finished her. That when the explosion tore through her right shoulder and the bones snapped like dry kindling, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen would finally be just another casualty statistic. Because what good is a Navy SEAL with only one working arm against 12 armed insurgents in the mountains of Khost Province? But Maya Chen didn't become a statistic. She didn't call for extraction. She didn't even break her silence on the radio. She just used her left hand to fashion a makeshift splint from her tactical vest, slipped deeper into the shadows of the Afghan ridgeline, and systematically eliminated every single hostile target between her team and safety. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now before we show you exactly how one SEAL turned a career-ending injury into the most legendary single-handed combat operation in modern warfare history, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from around the world, and stay locked in because this isn't just about surviving an ambush. This is about what happens when training, discipline, and pure determination collide with impossible odds. And the moment Maya proved that some warriors don't need two arms to win a war, everything changed. The morning of October 5, 2018, started like any other mission in the Spin Ghar Mountains. Operation Nightfall was supposed to be routine, a simple reconnaissance patrol to gather intel on Taliban supply routes moving through the Tora Bora cave complex. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen led Bravo Team, 4 elite SEALs who had operated together for 18 months without losing a single man. They were ghosts in the mountains, invisible, efficient, unstoppable. Maya had earned her place on the team the hard way. 5 years of proving herself in a brotherhood that didn't traditionally welcome women. She was smaller than her teammates, quieter, but possessed an almost supernatural ability to read terrain and predict enemy movement patterns. Her call sign was Compass because she never got lost and always found the way home. What nobody knew was that this mission would test every survival skill she'd ever learned. The team inserted at 0300 hours via helicopter drop on the western slope of the Safeco Range. Maya's squad included Petty Officer Jake Morrison on point, Petty Officer Luis Santos on communications, and Seaman Alex Turner covering their 6. They moved through the darkness like water flowing downhill, silent, purposeful, leaving no trace. The intelligence briefing had indicated minimal enemy presence in their area of operations. Intelligence was wrong. By 0600 hours, they had established an observation post overlooking the primary supply route. Maya peered through her scope, counting pack animals and cataloging weapons caches being moved through the valley below. Everything appeared normal. Santos monitored radio chatter, Morrison scanned for movement, Turner watched their rear approach. They were professionals doing professional work in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The attack came without warning at 0623 hours. Not from the valley they were watching, but from the high ground behind them. 12 Taliban fighters had been tracking them since insertion, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. The first RPG round detonated against the rock face, just 3 meters from Maya's position. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave devastating. Maya felt the shrapnel tear through her right shoulder before she heard the blast. Hot metal fragments shredded muscle and tendon, then found bone. The impact spun her around and slammed her against the rocks. Pain exploded through her nervous system like liquid fire. Her right arm went completely numb, hanging useless at her side. Blood poured down her tactical vest, turning the tan fabric dark crimson. But even as her body screamed in agony, Maya's mind stayed crystal clear. Years of training kicked in automatically. Assess, adapt, overcome. She rolled behind cover, grabbed her rifle with her left hand, and immediately began returning fire. Around her, the rest of Bravo Team was fighting for their lives, against overwhelming odds. Morrison took a round through the thigh within the first 30 seconds. Santos had his radio destroyed by a sniper's bullet, cutting them off from air support. Turner was pinned down by crossfire from 2 different positions. They were surrounded, outgunned, and completely cut off from extraction. Command would assume they were dead within the hour. That's when Maya made the decision that would define her legacy. Instead of calling for a desperate extraction that would likely get her entire team killed, she chose to go on the offensive. With her right arm shattered and useless, blood loss making her lightheaded, and enemy fire intensifying by the minute, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen began the most audacious single-handed assault in Navy SEAL history. She used her teeth to tighten the improvised tourniquet around her shoulder, grabbed extra magazines with her left hand, and disappeared into the maze of rocks and shadows that she had studied so carefully just minutes before. The Taliban fighters thought they had wounded prey trapped in a kill zone. What they actually had was an apex predator who no longer needed to follow the rules of conventional warfare. What happened next over? The course of the following 4 hours would be studied at military academies for decades to come. How does one injured SEAL eliminate 12 enemy combatants while protecting 3 wounded teammates? How do you fight a war with only 1 working arm? And what kind of person looks at impossible odds and decides that surrender simply isn't an option? Maya Chen was about to provide those answers in the most devastating way possible. Because sometimes the most dangerous warrior is the one who has absolutely nothing left to lose. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Spin Ghar Mountains of eastern Afghanistan don't forgive mistakes. At 8,000 feet above sea level, the air cuts through your lungs like broken glass, and the terrain shifts from razor-sharp ridgelines to hidden valleys where sound travels in ways that can get you killed. This wasn't Maya's first deployment to this godforsaken landscape, but it would be the one that tested every lesson she'd learned about survival in the world's most unforgiving combat zone, Forward Operating Base. Serpent sat like a concrete scar against the brown hills of Nangarhar Province, 30 miles from the Pakistani border. The base housed 2,500 American and Allied forces, but only a handful knew about the classified operations being run out of the Special Operations Compound, tucked behind triple-layer razor wire in the northeast corner. This was where SEAL Team 7's Bravo Squad called home between missions into Indian country. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at the edge of the compound's helicopter landing zone at 0230 hours, checking her gear for the 3rd time. Her M4A1 rifle hung across her chest, fitted with a suppressor and a COG scope. Her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, rode in a thigh holster she'd modified for her smaller frame. 40 pounds of additional equipment distributed across her tactical vest, night vision goggles, communication gear, medical supplies, ammunition, water, and enough explosives to level a small building. At 5'6" and 135 pounds, Maya was the smallest member of Bravo Team, a fact that had generated endless skepticism when she first arrived at Team 7 18 months earlier. The skepticism had lasted exactly 1 mission. Her teammates had learned that what Maya lacked in physical size, she made up for with an almost supernatural ability to read terrain and predict enemy movement. She felt like the mountains themselves, patient, calculating, always 3 steps ahead. Petty Officer Jake Morrison approached through the pre-dawn darkness, his own gear rattling softly with each step. At 6'2" and 210 pounds of solid muscle, Morrison was Maya's opposite in almost every way except competence. He'd been operating in Afghanistan for 4 years and had never lost a teammate. His call sign was Bulldozer, not because he was reckless, but because once he started moving toward an objective, nothing could stop him. Radio check. Compass, Morrison said, using Maya's call sign. His voice carried the easy confidence of someone who'd survived 47 combat missions without a scratch. "Lima Charlie Bulldozer," Maya replied, confirming clear communication. "Weather report shows clear skies until 1400 hours. Perfect visibility for overwatch." Behind Morrison came the other two members of their four-person element. Petty Officer Luis Santos carried the squad's communication equipment. A 20-pound package of encrypted radios, satellite uplinks, and signal intelligence gear that kept them connected to command and air support. Santos was a technical wizard. Seaman Alex Turner brought up the rear, moving with the practiced silence of someone trained to be invisible. Turner was their designated marksman, carrying a modified SR-25 sniper rifle capable of precise shots at distances exceeding 800 meters. At 23, he was the youngest member of the team, but his ability to read wind conditions and calculate ballistics under pressure had earned him a reputation as one of the finest shooters in the entire SEL community. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Establish an observation post overlooking Route Falcon, a mountain trail used by Taliban forces to move weapons and supplies from Pakistan into Afghanistan. Intelligence indicated moderate enemy activity, with convoys typically moving during daylight hours when coalition air assets were focused elsewhere. Bravo team would insert via helicopter, establish overwatch, collect intelligence for 72 hours, then extract. What the intelligence briefing hadn't mentioned was that the Taliban had been tracking coalition helicopter movements for weeks. They knew about the observation post before Bravo team even left the base. 12 fighters from the Hassoni network had been positioned in the high ground since the previous evening, waiting for the Americans to walk into their carefully prepared trap. The MH-60 Black Hawk lifted off from FOB Serpent at exactly 0300 hours, its rotor blades cutting through the thin mountain air with a distinctive whop 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 that echoed off the surrounding peaks. Maya sat in the cargo bay, feeling the familiar mixture of anticipation and calm focus that came before every mission. She'd done this 41 times before. She would insert, complete the mission, and return home safely with her team. The helicopter flew nap of the earth through the valleys, staying below the ridgelines to avoid detection by enemy spotters. Maya watched the landscape scroll pass through her night vision goggles, an alien, green world of rocks and shadows where death could be hiding behind any boulder. The pilot's voice crackled through her headset. 2 minutes to LZ. Maya checked her equipment one final time. Her rifle was loaded and ready. Her medical kit was positioned for quick access. Her backup ammunition was distributed across her vest for balance. Everything was exactly as it should be. What she couldn't know was that in less than 4 hours, that medical kit would be keeping her alive while she fought the most important battle of her career with only one working arm. The helicopter flared for landing on a narrow ridgeline barely wide enough for its skids. Maya and her team fast roped into the darkness, then watched the aircraft disappear into the night sky. They were alone now, 4 warriors deep in enemy territory, completely dependent on their training, their weapons, and each other. The Taliban fighters watching from the high ground smiled in the darkness. The trap was set. The hunt was about to begin. The insertion point was a knife-edge ridge barely 50 meters wide, sandwiched between 2 valleys that dropped away into absolute darkness. Maya touched down first, her boots finding purchase on loose shale that shifted and whispered under her weight. The helicopter's downdraft whipped dust and debris into miniature tornadoes before the aircraft banked hard left and disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the mountain silence and the smell of aviation fuel. Bravo team moved immediately into standard patrol formation. Morrison took point, his massive frame somehow managing to move silently across the treacherous terrain. Maya fell in behind him, her lighter footsteps finding the exact spots he'd tested safe. Santos followed with the communications gear, His constant awareness split between the team's movement and the encrypted radio chatter flowing through his headset. Turner brought up the rear, his sniper rifle tracking potential threat angles as they advanced. The target observation post lay 3 kilometers northeast, a rocky outcropping that would provide clear sight lines over Route Falcon and the valley approaches. Maya had studied the satellite imagery for hours, memorizing every ridge, every dead space, every potential avenue of approach or escape. The terrain was brutal, loose rock that could shift under your feet, hidden crevasses that could swallow a careless soldier, and sight lines that worked both ways. They moved in complete radio silence, communicating through hand signals refined by months of operating together. Morrison raised his fist. Halt. Maya immediately dropped to one knee, scanning her assigned sector through her rifle scope. Santos and Turner mirrored the movement, creating a defensive perimeter in the span of 3 seconds. This was the rhythm of combat operations, constant vigilance punctuated by moments of absolute stillness. Morrison's hand signals indicated movement ahead. 2 figures, 200 meters, stationary. Maya shifted her position slightly and acquired the targets through her scope. 2 Afghan men in traditional clothing, sitting beside what appeared to be a small cooking fire. Shepherds, most likely, or travelers seeking shelter in the mountains. They presented no immediate threat, but their presence complicated the mission. The standard operating procedure was clear: avoid contact with civilians whenever possible. Maya made the tactical decision to bypass the position, adding an extra kilometer to their movement, but maintaining operational security. She signaled the route change to her team. Morrison nodded his understanding and began leading them along a parallel ridge that would keep them hidden from the fire's glow. What Maya didn't know was that the civilians were Taliban spotters, equipped with encrypted radios and night vision equipment. They had been tracking the team's movement since insertion, feeding real-time position updates to the 12 fighters positioned near the target observation post. The spotters made no attempt to follow or engage. They simply watched, waited, and reported. The climb to the observation post took 2 hours of careful movement, across terrain that challenged even Maya's mountaineering skills. The altitude was beginning to tell on all of them. Hearts beating faster, breathing deeper. The constant awareness that a single misstep could mean a fatal fall into the darkness below. Maya's legs burned with the effort, but her mind remained focused on the tactical picture developing around them. At 0545 hours, they reached the objective, a cluster of boulders providing concealment and clear observation over the valley below. Maya immediately began establishing fields of fire while Morrison set up the primary observation position. Santos extended the team's communication antenna and began checking in with command back at FOB Serpent. Turner found a position that would allow him to cover their primary escape routes with precision fire if needed. The observation post was textbook perfect, concealed from below. Excellent sight lines, multiple escape routes, and defensible terrain. Maya felt the familiar satisfaction of a mission proceeding according to plan. They would observe, collect intelligence, and extract without ever being detected. She had no way of knowing that Taliban fighters were already positioned in the high ground above them, just waiting for full daylight to spring their trap. Santos's voice came through the team communication system, barely above a whisper. Serpent Base. This is Bravo 7. Position established. Beginning observation phase. All systems green. The response crackled back immediately. Copy Bravo 7. Weather window remains clear. Maintain radio schedule. Maya settled into her observation position, pulling out a spotting scope and beginning the methodical process of cataloging everything visible in the valley below. Route Falcon wound through the terrain like a brown scar, marked by the passage of countless feet, hooves, and vehicle tires. She could see the remains of old fighting positions from previous conflicts. The Soviets, the Mujahideen, Decades of warfare that had left the landscape scarred with bunkers, destroyed vehicles, and improvised fortifications. The intelligence briefing had indicated that Taliban supply convoys typically moved through this area between 0800 and 1200 hours, taking advantage of morning shadows and the reduced coalition air presence during shift changes. Maya's job was to observe, count, and report. Simple in concept, but requiring absolute patience and attention to detail. Morrison shifted beside her, checking his rifle and scanning the approaches to their position. "Feels quiet," he whispered. Maya nodded, but something in her gut disagreed. The mountains were never truly quiet. There were always sounds of wind, shifting rock, distant bird calls. This silence felt different, expectant, like the moment before lightning strikes. Turner's voice came through their earpieces. Movement. Valley floor. 300 meters south. Maya swung her scope toward the indicated position and immediately acquired the target. A single figure on foot, moving parallel to Route Falcon. Male, military age, carrying what appeared to be an assault rifle. Not a shepherd or innocent traveler. "Scout," Maya whispered into her microphone. "Probably advance element." She began tracking the figure's movement, noting his route, his pace, his apparent level of training. Professional movement, good use of concealment, definitely military or paramilitary. Her unease deepened. Santos was already adjusting his radio equipment, preparing to transmit the sighting report back to command. But before he could key his microphone, Maya held up her hand in the universal signal for halt. Something was wrong. The scout's movement pattern was too deliberate, too obviously visible, almost like he wanted to be seen. Maya's tactical instincts, honed by 18 months of combat operations, began screaming warnings. This felt like bait, like misdirection, like the opening move in a much larger game. She shifted her scope to scan the high ground around their position. Searching for the threat she couldn't see but knew was there. That's when she spotted the first muzzle flash in the rocks above them. And her world exploded into violence. The muzzle flash came from a position Maya had checked twice during their approach. Impossible, but there it was. A brief orange blossom in the rocks 150 meters above their observation post. Her mind processed the implications in microseconds. They were being watched. They were surrounded. And the scout in the valley had been exactly what she feared. Bait to keep their attention focused downward while death crept up from above. "Contact high." Maya's voice cut through the team communications as the first bullets began snapping overhead. The distinctive crack thump of incoming AK-47 fire echoed off the mountainsides, followed immediately by the deeper boom of an RPG launcher. The rocket-propelled grenade sailed wide of their position, detonating against the cliff face in a shower of rock fragments and orange flame. Morrison was already returning fire. His M4 rifle barking in controlled 3-round bursts toward the muzzle flashes. Santos dropped flat behind the communications equipment, simultaneously trying to protect the radio gear and establish contact with air support. Turner swung his sniper rifle toward the high ground. Searching for targets through his high-powered scope, Maya's tactical mind shifted into combat mode, processing information with crystalline clarity despite the chaos erupting around them. Multiple firing positions, coordinated attack, professional timing. This wasn't a chance encounter with a Taliban patrol. This was a carefully planned ambush executed by fighters who knew exactly where Bravo Team would be and when they would arrive. Serpent Base, this is Bravo 7. Santos shouted into his microphone, competing with the increasing volume of incoming fire. Contact. Grid reference 41 SMD 234-567. We are under effective fire from elevated positions. Request immediate air support. The response crackled back through static and the sound of explosions. Bravo 7. This is Serpent Base. Copy your contact report. Nearest air assets are 40 minutes out. Can you hold position? 40 minutes. Maya felt her stomach drop as the tactical situation crystallized. They were pinned in an observation post with limited cover, facing an unknown number of enemy fighters who held the high ground advantage. 40 minutes might as well have been 40 hours. Another RPG round screamed overhead, this one close enough that Maya felt the heat wash over her face. The explosion behind their position showered them with rock debris and filled the air with acrid smoke. The Taliban fighters were walking their fire closer with each shot, methodically bracketing the observation post to find the exact range. Turner's rifle cracked sharply as he engaged a target Maya couldn't see. "Got one," he reported calmly, working his bolt to chamber another round. "Sniper position, 2 o'clock high. But there's at least 3 more up there." Maya rose slightly from her covered position, trying to get a better view of the tactical situation. That's when she saw them, 4 more Taliban fighters moving along a parallel ridgeline, attempting to flank their position from the north. Professional movement, good spacing, carrying modern weapons. These weren't village militia or untrained insurgents. This was a veteran combat unit that had planned this engagement carefully. Flanking movement north side. Maya called out, shifting her rifle toward the new threat. Her first shots forced the flanking team to seek cover, but she could see them continuing to advance using the terrain for concealment. They would be in position to pour enfilading fire into the observation post within minutes. Morrison's voice came through the team communications, steady despite the intensity of the firefight. "We need to move. This position's compromised. Maya, you see any good egress routes?" Maya had been studying the terrain around their position since they'd arrived, automatically cataloging potential escape routes and defensive positions. There was a narrow ravine about 50 meters to their east that would provide concealment from the high ground, but reaching it would require crossing open ground under enemy observation. To the west, the terrain dropped away sharply, possible, but only if they were willing to risk a controlled fall down loose scree slopes in full combat gear. "Ravine to the east," Maya responded, "but we'll be exposed for 30 seconds crossing open ground. Western slope is possible, but we'd be sliding down on our asses for 200 meters. Another burst of automatic weapons fire raked their position, forcing all 4 SEALs to press themselves deeper into whatever cover they could find. Maya could hear the distinctive whine of bullets ricocheting off rocks just inches from her head. The Taliban fighters were finding their range, and the intensity of fire was increasing. Santos suddenly jerked backwards, his rifle spinning away across the rocks. "I'm hit," he called out, his voice tight with pain. Maya immediately low-crawled toward his position, staying below the level of the protective boulders. Santos was clutching his left shoulder, dark blood seeping between his fingers. "How bad?" Maya asked, already pulling medical supplies from her vest. Santos's face was pale, but his eyes were focused. "Through and through shoulder. Hurts like hell, but I can still function." He gestured toward his radio equipment with his good arm. But the radio took a hit too. "We're cut off from air support." Maya felt the tactical situation shift from bad to desperate. No communications, no air support, surrounded by an unknown number of enemy fighters who held every terrain advantage. This was exactly the kind of scenario that SEAL training prepared you for when everything went wrong simultaneously and survival depended entirely on individual skill and team cohesion. Turner's rifle cracked again, followed immediately by his calm voice. 2 down on the high ground. But they're moving more fighters into position. Count at least 8 still active. Maya made a command decision that would define the next phase of the battle. Instead of attempting a fighting withdrawal that would expose them to fire from multiple directions, she decided to hold their current position and make the Taliban pay dearly for every meter of ground. They had good cover, interlocking fields of fire, and enough ammunition to make a sustained defense possible. "We hold here," she announced to her team. "Make them come to us." "Santos, can you still operate the backup radio?" Santos nodded grimly, already reaching for the secondary communication system with his good arm. "Give me 2 minutes to get it online." Maya shifted her position slightly, acquiring a new target through her rifle scope. A Taliban fighter was attempting to advance down the slope toward their position, using a series of boulders for cover. She waited patiently for him to expose himself, controlling her breathing despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The fighter made his move, sprinting between 2 rocks. Maya's rifle cracked once, and the figure tumbled backward out of sight. Professional marksmanship under extreme stress, exactly what years of training had prepared her for. But even as she engaged individual targets, Maya could see the larger tactical picture developing. The Taliban fighters were patient, methodical, clearly experienced in mountain warfare. They were content to pin Bravo team in position, while more fighters moved to surround them completely. What none of them could predict was that in less than an hour, the careful tactical balance of this firefight would be shattered by a single RPG round that would change everything Maya thought she knew about fighting with a disability. The firefight had been raging for 27 minutes when Maya noticed the change in Taliban tactics. What had started as coordinated but cautious probing attacks was evolving into something more aggressive. The enemy fighters were no longer content to simply pin Bravo team in position. They were preparing for a final assault that would overrun the observation post entirely. Through her rifle scope, Maya watched 3 Taliban fighters moving with practiced coordination along the eastern ridgeline. Their movement was too smooth, too professional for typical insurgent forces. These men had military training, possibly former Afghan National Army soldiers who had switched sides, or foreign fighters with experience from other conflicts. Either way, they knew exactly what they were doing. "Santos, how's that backup radio coming?" Maya called out, never taking her eyes off the advancing threats. The intensity of incoming fire had increased over the past 5 minutes, indicating the enemy was building up for something significant. "Almost there, Compass," Santos replied through gritted teeth. Blood had soaked through the field dressing on his shoulder, but his hands remained steady as he worked to establish communications. "Backup system is older, lower power. Might not reach Serpent Base directly, but I can try to bounce a signal off the relay station at Firebase Ranger." Turner's sniper rifle cracked again from his position among the rocks. "That's 4 confirmed down," he reported. "But they keep bringing up replacements. I count at least 10 still active, maybe more." Maya felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. As team leader, every decision she made would determine whether her people lived or died. The Taliban fighters clearly had numerical superiority and better positioning. Conventional tactics suggested attempting a fighting withdrawal to more defensible terrain. But Maya could see that any movement would expose them to devastating crossfire. Morrison's voice cut through the tactical channel. "Movement in the valley. Looks like vehicles approaching from the south." Maya swung her spotting scope toward the route they had been observing. 2 pickup trucks were racing along Route Falcon, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. Even at this distance, she could see armed fighters in the truck beds. "Reinforcements," Maya said grimly. "How many?" 8, maybe 10 more fighters," Morrison replied. "They'll be in position to support the assault in 15 minutes. The tactical mathematics were becoming impossible. Bravo team was already outnumbered 3-1, and now additional enemy forces were arriving to tip the balance even further. Maya's mind raced through potential options. Call for immediate extraction, attempt to break contact and evade, or continue holding position and hope air support arrived before they were. Overwhelmed, Santos suddenly straightened behind his radio equipment. "Got it. Weak signal, but I've got comms with Firebase Ranger." He immediately began transmitting their situation. Ranger base, This is Bravo 7 actual. Emergency traffic. Grid 41, SMD 234-567. We are in heavy contact with superior enemy forces. Request immediate air support and medical evacuation. We have 1 wounded, ammunition running low. The response came back crackling with static. Bravo 7, this is Ranger Base. Copy your emergency traffic. We're scrambling 2 Apache gunships from Bagram. ETA 25 minutes. Can you hold position? 25 minutes. Maya did quick mental calculations of their ammunition supply and the rate at which the enemy was advancing. It would be close, very close. But it was better than the 40 minutes they had been looking at originally. Affirmative, Ranger Base, Santos transmitted. We can hold for 25 minutes. Be advised, enemy has vehicles and reinforcements arriving from the south. Maya was already adjusting their defensive plan to account for the incoming reinforcements. The pickup trucks would likely attempt to establish a support by fire position in the valley, allowing the Taliban fighters on the high ground to assault the observation post without fear of effective return fire. Turner, when those vehicles get in range, prioritize the crew-served weapons, Maya ordered. Don't let them set up a base of fire in the valley. Roger that, Compass. I can reach them from here, no problem. Another RPG round detonated close enough to shower their position with rock fragments. Maya felt several small pieces of shrapnel pepper her helmet and body armor, but nothing penetrated. The Taliban fighters were definitely preparing for their final assault. The rocket fire was intensifying. Designed to suppress the SEALs while assault teams moved into position, Morrison suddenly pointed toward the northern approach. Contact left. They're moving now. Maya swung her rifle toward the threat and immediately acquired targets. 4 Taliban fighters were bounding down the slope in pairs, using fire and movement tactics to close the distance to the observation post. Professional, coordinated, deadly effective if allowed to continue, Maya's rifle began speaking in precise, measured cadences. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter mid-stride. Her second forced the remaining 3 to seek cover behind a cluster of boulders 30 meters away. Morrison joined the engagement, his heavier rate of fire keeping the assault team pinned, while Maya repositioned for better angles. But even as they dealt with the immediate threat, Maya could see the larger picture developing. This assault from the north was just one piece of a coordinated attack. Taliban fighters were moving on multiple axes, using the terrain to approach from directions that would divide the SEALs. Attention and firepower. Turner's sniper rifle boomed as he engaged the vehicles in the valley. First truck is disabled, he reported calmly. But the fighters are dismounting and moving to cover. They'll be in supporting positions within 10 minutes. Santos, still managing the radio despite his wound, suddenly stiffened. Compass, Firebase Ranger, reports they're tracking additional Taliban units moving toward our position. Estimate 30 to 40 fighters total, with possible heavy weapons. Maya felt her blood run cold. 30 to 40 fighters against 4 SEALs, one of whom was wounded. Those weren't odds, that was mathematics of annihilation. But even as the tactical situation deteriorated beyond any reasonable hope of survival, Maya's mind remained focused on the immediate problem: keep her team alive until air support arrived. All positions conserve ammunition, she ordered. Make every shot count. We hold here until the Apaches arrive. What Maya didn't know was that the Taliban commander coordinating this attack had studied American tactics extensively. He knew exactly when Apache gunships would arrive, and he had timed his final assault to begin just minutes before air support could intervene. The next 15 minutes would determine whether Bravo team survived to sea extraction, or whether they would become another casualty. Statistic in America's longest war, the mountain silence that had seemed so peaceful just hours earlier was now filled with the sounds of approaching death. And Maya Chen was about to face the moment that would define her entire military career, The Taliban commander's voice echoed across the mountainside in accented English, amplified by a small megaphone that made his words carry clearly to the observation post. American soldiers, you are surrounded. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Islamic law. Maya felt her jaw clench at the psychological warfare attempt. The offer was meaningless. Everyone knew what happened to captured American Special Operations Forces in Taliban hands. But the fact that the enemy commander was confident enough to make such a public declaration meant he believed victory was certain. Ranger Base, this is Bravo 7, Santos transmitted urgently. Enemy is demanding surrender. Multiple assault teams in position. Request immediate update on air support, ETA. The response crackled back. Bravo 7, Apaches are 18 minutes out. Weather is deteriorating at Bagram. They're having to navigate around a storm system. Hold your position. 18 minutes. Maya looked around at her team's tactical situation and felt the weight of impossible mathematics. Morrison was down to his last 2 magazines. Turner had perhaps 15 rounds remaining for his sniper rifle. Santos was functioning on adrenaline and determination despite significant blood loss. And she could see at least 20 Taliban fighters in position for the final assault, with more arriving every few minutes. The enemy commander's voice boomed again. You have 2 minutes to decide. Throw down your weapons and walk out with your hands visible. This is your final warning. Maya keyed her radio to the team frequency. All positions, prepare for final assault. They're not waiting 18 minutes for the Apaches. She paused, making sure her voice carried absolute confidence despite the odds. We make them pay for every meter. No one gets overrun. We fight until air support arrives. Morrison's reply came back steady and determined. Hua compass. Let's give these bastards a lesson in American marksmanship. Turner added his characteristic calm professionalism. I've got good fields of fire on the primary approaches. They want this position. They're going to earn it. Even Santos, despite his wound, managed to inject dark humor into the moment. Radio's up and running. If we're going out, at least command will know exactly how we did it. Maya felt a surge of pride in her team, despite the desperate circumstances. This was what years of training and months of combat operations had built. Absolute trust and determination, even when facing certain death. They would not surrender, they would not break, and they would make the Taliban pay dearly for whatever ground they gained. The 2-minute deadline passed in absolute silence. Then, without warning, the mountainside erupted in coordinated violence. RPG rounds began detonating around the observation post in rapid succession, not random fire, but precisely targeted salvos designed to destroy specific defensive positions. Maya counted at least 4 rocket launchers firing simultaneously from different positions. The Taliban commander had been studying their layout during the firefight, identifying exactly where each SEAL was positioned. The first rocket detonated against the boulder Morrison was using for cover. The explosion so close that the concussion lifted him off the ground and slammed him against the rocks behind him. Maya saw him struggle to his feet, blood streaming from his nose and ears. But still gripping his rifle, Turner's sniper position came under direct assault from machine gun fire, long, sustained bursts designed to keep him pinned while assault teams advanced. Maya could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 automatic weapons concentrating their fire on the rocks where Turner was sheltered. Santos, despite his wounded shoulder, was calmly adjusting the radio equipment and maintaining contact with Firebase Ranger. Bravo 7 to Ranger Base, he transmitted between explosions. Final assault has commenced. We are under heavy rocket and machine gun fire. Air support status critical. Maya made a tactical decision that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Instead of remaining in her defensive position, she grabbed extra magazines and began moving between her teammates' positions, providing covering fire and redistributing ammunition. It was incredibly dangerous, crossing open ground under enemy observation, but it was the only way to maintain their defensive coordination. Her first sprint took her to Morrison's position. He was functioning but clearly affected by Maya made a tactical decision that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Instead of remaining in her defensive position, she grabbed extra magazines and began moving between her teammates' positions, providing covering fire and redistributing ammunition. It was incredibly dangerous, crossing open ground under enemy observation, but it was the only way to maintain their defensive coordination. Her first sprint took her to Morrison's position. He was functioning but clearly affected by the concussion from the RPG strike. "How you doing, bulldozer?" she asked while scanning for targets. "Seeing double, but I can still shoot," Morrison replied. His voice was slightly slurred, but his hands remained steady on his weapon. "They're massing for assault from the north. At least 8 fighters." Maya handed him 2 of her spare magazines. "Make them count." "I'm moving to Turner's position." Her second movement was even more dangerous. Turner was 50 meters away across completely open ground, and the Taliban machine gunners had excellent observation on the route. Maya waited for a lull in the incoming fire, then sprinted across the rocks in a zigzag pattern designed to throw off enemy aim. Bullets snapped past her head and sparked off the rocks around her feet. But she reached Turner's position without being hit. The young sniper was calm and focused despite the intensity of fire directed at his position. "Running low on ammunition," Turner reported. "But I can still reach the assault teams when they start their final bound." Maya gave him her last spare rifle magazines. "Prioritize the leaders and automatic weapons. Make every shot decisive." The Taliban assault began in earnest as Maya was making her way back to her original position. She could see fighters bounding down the slopes from multiple directions, using classic fire and movement techniques. This wasn't a wild charge. It was a coordinated military assault executed by professionals who understood small unit tactics. Maya settled into her firing position and began engaging targets with the methodical precision of years of training. Her rifle cracked steadily as she picked off Taliban fighters who exposed themselves during their movement. But for every fighter she dropped, 2 more seemed to take his place. Santos's voice cut through the chaos. "Ranger Base reports Apaches are 15 minutes out, but they're requesting we mark our position with strobes. Danger close air support authorized." Maya felt a moment of hope. 15 minutes was still an eternity in combat time, but danger close air support meant the Apache gunships could engage targets within meters of their position. If they could hold out just a little longer. That single quotes S when she saw the Taliban fighters carrying the recoilless rifle toward a firing position that would have a clear shot at their observation post. The weapon could punch through their rock cover like it was paper, turning their defensive positions into death traps. Maya made another split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of remaining in her protected position, she grabbed her rifle and began moving to flank the recoilless rifle team. It was tactically insane, leaving cover to assault a superior force, but it was the only way to prevent her team from being systematically destroyed. What she couldn't see was the Taliban fighter positioned with an RPG launcher in the rocks above her new route, waiting for exactly this kind of movement. As Maya sprinted toward the recoilless rifle position, she was running directly into the sights of a weapon that would shatter her world in ways she could never have imagined. The next few seconds would transform Staff Sergeant Maya Chen from a team leader into something the Taliban fighters had never encountered. A wounded warrior with absolutely nothing left to lose. Maya's boots found purchase on the loose shale as she bounded toward the recoilless rifle position, her M4 rifle tracking potential threats while she moved. The Taliban weapon team was setting up behind a natural rock formation 60 meters from the observation post, close enough to put devastating direct fire into every position her team occupied. If that recoilless rifle came online, Bravo team would be systematically eliminated within minutes. The sound of her movement across the rocky terrain was masked by the ongoing firefight. Automatic weapons chattering from multiple positions as Taliban fighters maintained suppressing fire on Morrison, Turner, and Santos. Maya used the noise and chaos to her advantage, moving in short bounds from cover to cover. Getting closer to the weapon team with each sprint dot, she could see 3 Taliban fighters, working frantically to position the recoilless rifle. One was adjusting the tripod legs for proper elevation, another was loading the massive round into the breech, and the third was scanning the observation post through binoculars, selecting targets. Professional, coordinated, deadly efficient. These weren't village militia. They were experienced fighters who understood. Crew-served weapons. Maya reached a position 30 meters from the weapon team and settled into a stable firing position behind a boulder. Through her rifle scope, she could see the loader chambering the round while the gunner made final adjustments to the weapon's aim. In seconds, that recoilless rifle would send a high-explosive round directly into Turner's sniper position. She controlled her breathing, centered the crosshairs on the gunner's chest, and began applying pressure to the trigger. Years of marksmanship training compressed into a single moment of absolute focus. The rifle would fire in another half-second, eliminating the primary threat to her team. That's when the world exploded around her. The RPG round struck the rocks 3 meters to her left. The detonation so close that Maya felt the heat wash over her entire body. The blast wave picked her up and hurled her sideways into a cluster of jagged stones. She hit hard, her rifle spinning away across the rocks, her body tumbling in a shower of debris and smoke. For a moment, Maya's world went completely silent. Not the peaceful quiet of the mountains, but the absolute absence of sound that comes with severe concussion. She lay on her back, staring up at the Afghan sky, trying to process what had happened, trying to inventory her body for damage. Then the pain hit like a sledgehammer. Her right shoulder felt like it was on fire. Not the dull ache of fatigue or the sharp pain of a muscle strain, but the deep, grinding agony of bones moving in ways they were never designed to move. Maya tried to push herself up with her right arm and immediately collapsed back to the rocks. Gasping with the intensity of the pain, she looked down at her shoulder and felt her stomach drop. Her right arm was hanging at an unnatural angle, clearly broken between the shoulder and elbow. Blood was soaking through her tactical vest where shrapnel had torn through the fabric and into the muscle beneath. Her primary weapon was gone, blown away by the explosion. Maya's tactical mind, even clouded by pain and concussion, immediately began assessing the new reality. She was alone, separated from her team, with a completely useless right arm and no rifle. The Taliban fighters who had fired the RPG would be moving to confirm the kill within minutes. She needed to move, needed to find cover, needed to get back to her team. But first, she needed to deal with the immediate threat. The recoilless rifle team was still setting up their weapon, apparently unaware that Maya had survived the RPG strike. Through the smoke and debris, she could see them making final preparations to engage the observation post. In less than a minute, they would begin systematically destroying every position her teammates occupied. Maya reached for her sidearm with her left hand, the Sig Sauer P226 sliding smoothly from its thigh holster. She had trained extensively with her non-dominant hand, but always as a backup skill, never as a primary fighting technique. Now her life and the lives of her teammates depended entirely on her ability to fight. Left-handed. She forced herself into a sitting position, using her left hand to steady herself against a rock. The movement sent waves of agony through her shattered shoulder, but Maya gritted her teeth and focused on the tactical problem. 3 enemy fighters, 30 meters away, positioned behind light cover. She had 17 rounds in her pistol and 1 spare magazine. Maya had never attempted Precision pistol shooting at 30 meters with her non-dominant hand under combat conditions. The maximum effective range for a pistol was generally considered to be 25 meters under ideal circumstances. But ideal circumstances had just been shattered along with her right arm. She raised the pistol with her left hand, trying to find a stable shooting position despite the pain and the awkward angle. The weapon felt foreign in her non-dominant grip, heavier somehow, less precise. Through the iron, her second shot caught the gunner center mass, dropping him beside the recoilless rifle. The loader was raising his AK-47 when Maya's third shot took him in the chest, spinning him backward into the rocks. The spotter had time to fire a quick burst in her direction before Maya's fourth shot silenced him permanently. 3 shots. 3 kills at 30 meters with her non-dominant hand, while suffering from a compound fracture and severe concussion. It was shooting that would have been impressive under any circumstances. Under these conditions, it was nearly miraculous, but Maya had no time to appreciate the marksmanship. The sound of gunfire had alerted other Taliban fighters to her position, and she could see armed figures moving in her direction from multiple angles. She was alone, wounded, and running out of ammunition. Santos's voice crackled through her earpiece. Compass, what's your status?" "We heard the RPG strike." Maya keyed her radio with her left hand while scanning for threats. "Still operational," she replied, though her voice was tight with pain. "Recoilless rifle neutralized, but I'm separated from the team. Right arm is combat ineffective. Can you make it back to our position?" Morrison's voice, steady despite the ongoing firefight at the observation post. Maya looked at the terrain between her current position and the team. Open ground under observation from multiple Taliban positions, with her ability to move and fight severely compromised. Attempting to rejoin the team would likely result in her death and might compromise their defensive position. "Negative," Maya replied. "I'm going to create a distraction. Keep the pressure off your position until air support arrives." It was a decision that defied every principle of small unit tactics. A wounded soldier, alone, taking on multiple enemy fighters with just a pistol and determination. But sometimes the principles of tactics had to give way to the realities of survival. Maya Chen was about to demonstrate that some warriors don't need 2 working arms to wage war. They just need the will to keep fighting when everything else has been taken away. The Taliban fighters moving toward her position had no idea they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. A Navy SEAL who had just discovered that her greatest weapon wasn't her rifle or her training, but her absolute refusal to surrender. Maya pressed herself against the rocky outcropping, using her left hand to fashion a crude sling from her tactical vest's spare straps. The makeshift immobilization wouldn't heal her shattered arm, but it would prevent the broken bones from grinding against each other with every movement. Each adjustment sent lightning bolts of agony through her nervous system, but she worked with methodical precision, treating her injury as just another tactical problem to solve. The sound of approaching footsteps on loose shale told her that the Taliban fighters had located her position. At least 4 sets of boots, moving with the careful coordination of experienced soldiers. They would reach her hiding spot within 2 minutes, and when they did, they would expect to find either a corpse or a wounded American begging for mercy. Maya checked her ammunition, 13 rounds remaining in her pistol, plus 1 spare magazine. 17 bullets total against an unknown number of enemy fighters who held every tactical advantage, except one. They didn't know she was still capable of fighting. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see the first Taliban fighter advancing up the slope toward her position. Mid-20s, carrying a well-maintained AK-47, moving with the confidence of someone who believed the threat had been eliminated. His mistake was assuming that an RPG blast automatically meant mission accomplished. That Maya waited until he was 15 meters away before rising from behind her cover. The fighter's eyes went wide with shock as he realized the American soldier was not only alive but pointing a pistol directly at his chest. Maya's first shot dropped him before he could raise his rifle. The sound of gunfire immediately brought shouts from the other approaching fighters. Maya could hear them coordinating in rapid Pashto, adjusting their approach to deal with an active threat instead of a casualty recovery. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they flanked her position. Instead of waiting for them to surround her, Maya made a decision that violated every principle of wounded soldier protocol. She left her covered position and began moving aggressively toward the remaining Taliban fighters, using the terrain to mask her approach while engaging targets of opportunity. Her left-handed shooting was improving with each engagement. What had felt awkward and uncertain just minutes earlier was beginning to feel natural, almost instinctive. Years of ambidextrous training were paying dividends as muscle memory adapted to the new reality of single-handed combat. Maya caught the second fighter by surprise as he attempted to flank her original position. He was focused on the rocks where she had been hiding, never expecting her to be moving toward him through the boulder field. Her shot caught him in the side as he turned toward the sound of her movement. The third and fourth fighters had taken cover behind a cluster of rocks 50 meters downslope. Maya could see muzzle flashes as they fired toward her general area. But their shots were going wide. They knew approximately where she was but couldn't get a precise fix on her position. Maya used their uncertainty to her advantage, moving in a wide arc that would bring her around behind their defensive position. The movement was exhausting with only one functional arm, forcing her to use her legs and core muscles to maintain balance while traversing the treacherous terrain. Her radio crackled with Santos's voice. "Compass, we're getting hammered over here. The main assault is starting. How's your situation?" Maya paused behind a boulder to catch her breath and assess her tactical situation. She could hear the intensity of gunfire increasing at the observation post, indicating that the Taliban commander had launched his final assault while she was dealing with the flanking element. "Still mobile," Maya replied into her microphone. "I've neutralized the immediate threat to my position, but there are more fighters moving in from the west." Turner's voice cut in. "Air support is 12 minutes out. Can you hold until then?" 12 minutes. Maya looked at her remaining ammunition and the terrain around her position. She was running low on bullets, her right arm was completely useless, and she could see at least 6 more Taliban fighters moving in her direction. 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours. "Affirmative," Maya replied, "because that's what you said when your teammates needed you to hold. I'll keep them busy down here." What she didn't say was that she had no intention of simply holding a defensive position for 12 minutes. Maya Chen had spent her entire military career being underestimated, first as a woman in a male-dominated profession, then as a smaller soldier among larger teammates, and now as a wounded warrior facing overwhelming odds. Each time, she had responded the same way, by exceeding every expectation and redefining what was possible. Maya spotted movement in the rocks below her position. 2 Taliban fighters were working their way up the slope, using bounds and overwatch to advance while maintaining mutual support. Professional tactics executed by experienced fighters who understood small unit movement. She waited until both fighters were committed to their movement, then engaged the trailing fighter first, a technique designed to trap the lead element in the open. Her shot caught the second fighter center mass, causing him to tumble backward down the rocky slope. The lead fighter immediately sought cover and began returning fire in her direction. His shots were accurate enough to force Maya to keep her head down, but not precise enough to hit her protected position. She could hear him shouting orders to other fighters, coordinating a new assault on her position. Maya realized that her individual engagement was having an unexpected effect on the larger battle. By drawing Taliban fighters away from the main assault on the observation post, she was reducing the pressure on her teammates. Every fighter dealing with her was one less rifle pointed at Morrison, Turner, and Santos. She made a tactical decision that would have seemed insane to any military planner. Instead of conserving ammunition and fighting defensively, she would go on the offensive. She would hunt Taliban fighters in their own terrain, with one working arm and a pistol, turning herself into such a threat that they would have no choice but to divert resources from the main assault. Maya began moving aggressively through the boulder field, using her knowledge of small unit tactics to predict where enemy fighters would position themselves. She was thinking like her opponents, anticipating their movements, staying one step ahead of fighters who couldn't believe a wounded American was actively hunting them. Her next engagement came as she rounded a rock formation and found herself face to face with a Taliban fighter who was equally surprised by the encounter. Both combatants raised their weapons simultaneously, but Maya's years of close-quarters combat training gave her a split-second advantage. Her shot was fired a fraction of a second before his, and a fraction of a second was the difference between life and death. As she moved to the next position, Maya could hear the Taliban fighters beginning to coordinate specifically against her. Radio chatter in Pashto was increasing, and she could identify her own call sign being discussed in their transmissions. She was becoming enough of a problem that the enemy commander was having to divert attention from the main assault. Maya checked her ammunition, 8 rounds remaining in her current magazine, plus 1 spare. She had perhaps enough bullets for 2 more engagements before she would be reduced to fighting with whatever weapons she could take from enemy casualties. But as she prepared for the next phase of her one-woman war against overwhelming odds, Maya Chen felt something she hadn't expected: absolute clarity. The pain in her shoulder had faded to a manageable background noise. Her left-handed shooting was becoming more precise with each engagement. And for the first time since the ambush began, she wasn't just surviving, she was winning. The Taliban fighters moving toward her position were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who has already lost everything except the will to keep fighting. Maya's tactical situation had evolved beyond anything covered in military doctrine. She was now operating as a one-person disruption force behind enemy lines, wounded and low on ammunition, but systematically eliminating Taliban fighters who had been tasked with overrunning her team's position. Each engagement was reducing the combat effectiveness of the assault force attacking the observation post. Through her earpiece, she could monitor the radio traffic from her teammates. The intensity of fire at their position had decreased noticeably over the past 10 minutes, and Turner reported that the Taliban assault teams seemed to be losing coordination. What they didn't know was that Maya had killed or wounded 7 enemy fighters, including 2 apparent squad leaders, whose loss was creating gaps in the Taliban command structure. Maya found herself in a natural choke point between 2 rock formations, a position that would force any advancing Taliban fighters to expose themselves while crossing a narrow gap. She settled into a stable shooting position, using her left hand to brace the pistol against a rock for additional stability. Her ammunition situation was becoming critical, 5 rounds remaining in her current magazine, plus 1 spare. The sound of voices speaking in urgent Pashto echoed off the rocks nearby. Maya counted at least 3 different speakers, possibly 4, coordinating their approach to her position. They knew approximately where she was located, but the terrain prevented them from getting a clear view of her defensive position. Maya keyed her radio quietly. "Bravo 7, this is Compass. I've got multiple tangos approaching my position. What's your air support status?" Santos's voice came back immediately. 8 minutes out, Compass. Apache Flight is requesting your position for danger close support. 8 minutes. Maya looked at her remaining ammunition and the tactical situation around her position. 8 minutes was achievable if she was careful with her shots and made every bullet count. But it would require perfect execution under nearly impossible circumstances. The first Taliban fighter appeared at the edge of the gap, moving cautiously but purposefully toward her position. Maya waited until he was fully committed to crossing the open ground before engaging. Her shot caught him center mass, dropping him in the middle of the gap where his body would serve as both confirmation of her accuracy and a psychological obstacle for the remaining fighters. The psychological effect was immediate. Maya could hear urgent discussions among the remaining Taliban fighters, their voices carrying a note of frustration and growing concern. They had expected to find a wounded American soldier hiding behind rocks, waiting to be captured or killed. Instead, they were facing an active combatant who was systematically eliminating their assault team. Maya used the momentary pause to change her position, moving 20 meters to a new firing point that would give her a different angle on the approaches to her location. The movement was exhausting with only one functional arm, but it was essential to prevent the enemy fighters from fixing her exact position. Her new vantage point revealed two Taliban fighters attempting to flank her original position from the north. They were moving carefully, using good tactical spacing and mutual support, but they were focused on the wrong location. Maya had a clear shot at both of them from her new position. She engaged the trailing fighter first, dropping him with a single shot that echoed off the surrounding rocks. The lead fighter immediately sought cover and began scanning for her muzzle flash. But Maya had already shifted position again. Using the boulder field to mask her movement, the remaining ammunition in her pistol was down to 3 rounds. Maya reached for her spare magazine with her left hand, executing a one-handed magazine change that she had practiced hundreds of times, but never under these conditions. The motion was awkward and time-consuming, with only one functional hand. But years of muscle memory carried her through the procedure. As she was completing the magazine change, Maya heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter in the distance. The sound was still faint, but growing stronger. The Apache gunships were approaching ahead of schedule. She felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by the realization that she needed to mark her position to prevent friendly fire incidents. Maya reached for her signal strobe with her left hand, activating the infrared beacon that would be visible to the Apache crews through their night vision systems. The strobe would identify her as a friendly force, but it would also reveal her exact location to any Taliban fighters. Equipped with night vision capabilities, the tactical risk was acceptable given the alternative. Better to be spotted by enemy ground forces than to be engaged by friendly aircraft that couldn't distinguish between American and Taliban positions in the rocky terrain. Her radio crackled with Santos's voice. "Compass, Apache flight is requesting confirmation of your position. They have visual on multiple heat signatures in your area and need to know which one is friendly." Maya keyed her microphone. "Compass position marked with IR strobe. I'm the signature that's not shooting at you when you arrive." Turner's voice cut in with a note of dark humor. "Roger that, Compass. Try not to move around too much when the fireworks start." Maya could see the last 2 Taliban fighters in her immediate area attempting to withdraw toward the main assault force. Their tactical discipline was breaking down as the sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. These fighters had probably never faced close air support before, and the psychological effect of inbound gunships was causing them to abandon their mission. Maya made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of allowing the fighters to withdraw and potentially regroup with the main force, she began pursuing them, moving aggressively through the rocks with her pistol ready. She was determined to eliminate every threat in her area before the Apaches arrived. The pursuit brought her to the edge of a small plateau that provided an excellent view of the entire battlefield. Maya could see the observation post where her teammates were still engaged in intense firefight with the remaining Taliban assault force. She could see the disabled vehicles in the valley where Turner had engaged the reinforcements. And she could see the 2 Apache gunships approaching from the east, their distinctive silhouettes growing larger against the morning sky. Maya also saw something that made her blood run cold. A Taliban fighter crouched behind rocks just 40 meters from the observation post. armed with an RPG launcher and preparing to fire at her teammate's position. The range was point blank for a rocket-propelled grenade, and her teammates had no visibility on the threat from their defensive positions. The fighter was 150 meters from Maya's position, far beyond the effective range of her pistol under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Maya Chen had already redefined what was possible for a wounded warrior with only one working arm. She dropped to a prone position, using rocks to steady her left hand for the longest pistol shot of her career. Through the iron sights, she could see the Taliban fighter adjusting his aim toward Morrison's position. In seconds, he would fire a rocket that would kill or seriously wound her team leader. Maya controlled her breathing, aligned the sights, and began applying pressure to the trigger. 150 meters, one-handed, with a pistol, to save the lives of her teammates. It was a shot that belonged in the realm of legend rather than reality, but Maya Chen had already passed beyond the boundaries of what anyone thought was possible. Maya's world narrowed to the precise alignment of iron sights, her breathing pattern, and the trigger pressure building under her left index finger. 150 meters separated her from a Taliban fighter who was seconds away from launching an RPG directly into her teammate's defensive position. The shot was beyond the acknowledged effective range of any sidearm, attempted by a wounded operator, using her non-dominant hand under extreme combat stress. The mathematics of ballistics argued against success. Pistol rounds lose velocity and accuracy dramatically beyond 50 meters. Wind conditions at this altitude could deflect a bullet by several inches. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, presenting only a narrow profile. Any one of these factors should have made the shot impossible. Maya exhaled halfway and held her breath, feeling her heartbeat steady into the controlled rhythm that preceded precision shooting. Years of training compressed into a single moment of absolute focus. She squeezed the trigger with smooth, consistent pressure, the way her instructors had taught her thousands of repetitions ago. The Sig Sauer bucked in her left hand, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the rocks around her position. Maya immediately lost sight of the target through the pistol's iron sights, but she tracked the bullet's flight path through muscle memory and professional instinct. 150 meters away, the Taliban fighter jerked backward from his firing position, the RPG launcher tumbling from his hands to clatter among the rocks. Maya's bullet had found its mark, striking the fighter center mass and eliminating the immediate threat to her teammate's position. "Target down," Maya reported into her radio, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. "RPG threat neutralized." Morrison's voice came back immediately. "Copy, Compass. We didn't even see that shooter." "Outstanding work." Maya was already moving to a new position, anticipating that the gunshot would draw attention from any remaining Taliban fighters in the area. As she moved, the sound of Apache helicopters grew significantly louder. The gunships were less than 2 minutes from arriving on station. That's when Maya saw them, the main Taliban assault force. Approximately 15 fighters, moving in coordinated bounds toward the observation post from the eastern approach. They had used the distraction of Maya's individual engagement to advance to within assault range of her teammate's position. In less than 3 minutes, they would overrun the observation post through sheer numbers and coordinated fire. Maya realized that her teammates couldn't see the approaching assault force from their defensive positions. The angle of approach used the terrain to mask the Taliban advance until the last possible moment. By the time Morrison, Turner, and Santos detected the threat, it would be too late to establish effective defensive fires. Maya keyed her radio. "All Bravo positions. Be advised you have approximately 15 tangos approaching from the east. They're using the ridgeline to mask their advance. A to your position, 3 minutes." Santos responded immediately. "Cannot observe from our current positions." Can you provide overwatch? Maya looked at her tactical situation. Elevated position with clear observation of the Taliban advance. Good fields of fire, but only 14 rounds remaining in her pistol. Engaging 15 fighters with a sidearm while wounded would normally be considered tactical suicide. But normal considerations had ceased to apply over an hour ago. Affirmative, Maya replied. I have eyes on the assault force. Beginning engagement. Maya selected her first target, the apparent leader of the assault force. Identifiable by his position at the front of the formation and the way other fighters looked to him for direction. Leadership targets were always priority in any engagement, eliminating commanders disrupted coordination and created confusion among subordinate fighters. Her first shot at 120 meters dropped the Taliban leader mid-stride. The effect on the assault force was immediate and dramatic. The coordinated advance faltered as fighters sought cover and tried to locate the source of the incoming fire. Maya had disrupted their timing and forced them to deal with an unexpected threat from an unexpected direction. Maya shifted her aim to the next priority, target, a fighter carrying what appeared to be a machine gun. Crew-served weapons represented disproportionate combat power and needed to be eliminated quickly. Her second shot was slightly off target, wounding rather than killing the machine gunner, but forcing him to abandon his weapon and seek medical attention. The remaining Taliban fighters were now fully aware that they were under effective fire from an elevated position. But the rocky terrain made it difficult for them to locate Maya's exact firing position. They began returning fire in her general direction, but their shots were imprecise and ineffective at the range and angle involved. Maya continued her systematic engagement of the assault force, prioritizing targets based on their weapons and apparent leadership roles. Each shot was carefully aimed and deliberately placed, making maximum use of her limited ammunition. Her left-handed shooting had evolved from awkward necessity to practice precision over the course of the engagement. The psychological effect of precise, continuous fire from an unseen shooter was devastating to Taliban morale. These fighters had expected to assault a fixed defensive position occupied by wounded Americans. Instead, they found themselves under attack from multiple directions by opponents who seemed to possess almost supernatural marksmanship abilities. Santos's voice crackled through Maya's earpiece. Compass. Apache flight is 30 seconds out. They're requesting immediate target designation for danger close support. Maya could see the helicopter gunships approaching from the east, their distinctive profiles now clearly visible against the morning sky. The Apaches carried enough firepower to eliminate the remaining Taliban force in minutes. But they needed precise target information to avoid hitting friendly forces in the complex terrain. Apache flight. This is Compass. Maya transmitted on the air support frequency. I have eyes on approximately 10 remaining tangos moving in assault formation toward friendly positions. Marking targets with tracer fire. Maya loaded her last magazine and began engaging targets with every fourth round being a tracer, creating visible indicators that the Apache crews could use to identify enemy positions. The tracer rounds drew bright lines through the air, pointing directly at Taliban fighters who were now caught in the open with nowhere to hide. The lead Apache pilot's voice came through the radio with professional calm. Compass. We have visual on your tracers. Confirm all friendlies are in protected positions. Maya verified that her teammates were in covered positions, then cleared the gunships for engagement. All Bravo elements in hard cover. You are cleared hot on designated targets. The Apache attack was swift and devastating. Chain gun fire raked the Taliban positions with surgical precision, eliminating fighters who had survived Maya's individual engagement. Hellfire missiles eliminated the few remaining defensive positions where Taliban fighters had sought shelter within 3 minutes of arriving on station. The Apache gunships had completely eliminated the Taliban assault force. The mountainside fell silent except for the sound of helicopter rotors and the occasional crack of cooling metal. Maya slumped against the rocks, suddenly aware that the immediate combat threat had ended. Her right arm throbbed with renewed intensity as adrenaline began to fade from her system. She had expended all of her ammunition except for 2 rounds, eliminated at least 10 enemy fighters with precision pistol shooting, and prevented her teammates from being overrun by a numerically superior force. Santos's voice came through her earpiece with obvious relief. "Compass, this is Bravo 7. Area is secure. Medical evacuation is inbound. What's your status?" Maya looked down at her shattered right arm, assessed her ammunition situation, and considered the tactical miracle she had just participated in. "Still operational," she replied, because that's what Navy SEALs said when they had exceeded every possible expectation and redefined what was possible under impossible circumstances. The sound of approaching helicopters indicated that extraction was imminent. But Maya Chen had already accomplished something that would be studied and discussed for decades. She had proven that the most dangerous weapon in any warrior's arsenal isn't technology or numbers or superior positioning dots. Sometimes it's simply the absolute refusal to surrender. Medical evacuation helicopter touched down on the same ridgeline where Bravo team had inserted 6 hours earlier. But the tactical situation had transformed completely. What had begun as a routine reconnaissance mission had evolved into one of the most extraordinary individual combat performances in modern military history. As the Black Hawk's rotors wound down, a team of combat medics rushed toward the observation post where Maya's teammates waited. Maya made her way down from her elevated position, moving carefully across the rocky terrain with her right arm secured in the makeshift sling. Every step sent shockwaves of pain through her shattered shoulder, but she maintained her disciplined pace, refusing to show weakness even though the immediate threat had ended. Her left hand still gripped her empty pistol, unwilling to holster the weapon until she was absolutely certain the area was secure. The scene at the observation post told the story of a desperate defensive action. Brass casings littered the rocky ground where Morrison, Turner, and Santos had made their stand. Bullet scars marked the protective boulders, and the acrid smell of gunpowder hung in the thin mountain air. But all 3 of her teammates were alive, mobile, and ready for extraction. Chief Petty Officer Rebecca Martinez, the senior medic on the evacuation team, immediately assessed Santos's shoulder wound while simultaneously observing Maya's condition. Martinez had 18 years of combat medical experience and had treated hundreds of wounded special operations personnel. What she saw in Maya's eyes was something she had rarely encountered: absolute tactical clarity despite severe trauma. "How's your pain level, Staff Sergeant?" Martinez asked as she began examining Maya's makeshift sling and the obvious deformity of her right shoulder. "Manageable," Maya replied, which was military shorthand for extraordinarily painful but not affecting my ability to function. Martinez nodded, understanding the language of warriors who defined their condition in terms of operational capability rather than medical symptoms. Morrison approached from his defensive position, his face showing the effects of concussion, but his movements steady and purposeful. "Compass, what you did out there ... He started, then stopped, apparently unable to find adequate words for what he had witnessed. "Did my job," Maya replied simply, deflecting the praise with characteristic professionalism. But Morrison shook his head, his expression serious. "No, what you did was rewrite the definition of doing your job. 14 confirmed kills with a pistol, left-handed, with a compound fracture. That 150-meter shot on the RPG gunner." Morrison paused, looking out across the battlefield where Apache gunships were still conducting battle damage assessment. "That's not training. That's something else entirely." Turner approached from his sniper position, carrying his rifle with obvious respect for the weapon that had served him well during the engagement. "I've been shooting precision rifles for 8 years," he said to Maya. "What you accomplished with a sidearm today exceeds anything I've ever done with a purpose-built sniper system." Santos, despite his own wound, was already documenting the engagement for after-action reports. His tactical notebook was filled with precise timelines, ammunition expenditures, and casualty assessments. Compass, preliminary count shows you eliminated at least 14 enemy fighters during a 2-hour engagement. Individual marksmanship under these conditions. He gestured toward her injured arm. Double quotes ... at single quotes is going to be studied at every military academy in the country. Maya felt uncomfortable with the attention and praise. In her mind, she had simply done what the tactical situation required: adapt to changing circumstances and complete the mission. The fact that those circumstances included a shattered arm and overwhelming enemy numbers was simply part of the challenge to be overcome. Chief Martinez completed her initial assessment of Maya's injuries and immediately called for priority medical evacuation. "We need to get you to a surgical facility immediately," she told Maya. "You're showing signs of significant blood loss, possible nerve damage, and definite bone fragmentation. You should have been unconscious from pain an hour ago." Maya looked around the battlefield one final time, conducting her own after-action assessment. The Taliban assault force had been completely eliminated by the combination of her individual engagement and Apache gunship support. Her teammates were alive and ready for extraction. The mission objective had been accomplished despite circumstances that should have resulted in total mission failure. Commander Patricia Hayes, the Special Operations Task Force leader, arrived on the next helicopter and immediately sought out Maya for a preliminary debrief. Hayes had been tracking the engagement through radio communications and Apache gun camera footage. Her expression carried the weight of someone who had just witnessed something unprecedented in her 22 years of military service. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Commander Hayes began, using Maya's formal rank and surname in recognition of the official nature of her inquiry. "I need to understand exactly what happened here today. My initial reports indicate that you continued combat operations for over 2 hours with a severe arm injury, eliminated multiple enemy combatants with precision pistol fire, and prevented the overrun of your team's position." Maya provided a concise tactical summary of the engagement, focusing on enemy capabilities, terrain factors, and ammunition expenditures, rather than the extraordinary nature of her individual performance. Her report was professional, detailed, and completely devoid of self-congratulation or dramatic embellishment. Commander Hayes listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions about shooting techniques and tactical decisions. As Maya concluded her summary, Hayes made notes in her official log and then looked directly at Maya with an expression of profound respect. "Staff Sergeant, what you accomplished today will be forwarded immediately to Special Operations Command, with my strongest recommendation for recognition. This wasn't just exceptional individual performance under adverse conditions. This was the kind of action that defines what we mean when we talk about warrior ethos." Maya nodded respectfully but remained focused on practical concerns. "Permission to request priority evacuation for my teammates, ma'am. Santos needs surgical attention for his shoulder wound, and Morrison should be evaluated for concussion." Hayes smiled at Maya's immediate concern for her teammates, despite her own severe injuries. "Already arranged, Staff Sergeant. All of Bravo team is going directly to Landstuhl Medical Center in Germany for comprehensive treatment." As the medical team prepared Maya for helicopter evacuation, she took one last look across the Afghan mountainside, where she had just redefined what was possible for a wounded warrior. The terrain that had seemed so hostile and unforgiving just hours earlier now looked like simply another mission environment where American Special Operations Forces had proven their superiority through skill, determination, and absolute refusal to surrender. Maya, Chun had entered these mountains as a highly skilled Navy SEAL. She was leaving as something approaching legend, a warrior who had demonstrated that the human spirit, properly trained and absolutely committed, could overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy, and achieve any objective. The helicopter lifted off, carrying Maya toward medical treatment and a recovery that would be followed by recognition from the highest levels of military leadership. But for Maya, the most important measure of success was simple. Her teammates were alive. The mission was complete, and they were all going home. 6 months after the engagement in the Spin Ghar Mountains, Maya Chen stood before the formation at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. Her right arm, now fully functional after 3 surgeries and intensive rehabilitation, hung naturally at her side. The morning sun reflected off the Pacific Ocean beyond the base, creating a stark contrast to the harsh Afghan landscape where she had earned her place in military history. The ceremony was attended by senior officers from across the Special Operations community, including Admiral Catherine Morrison, Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, and General Robert Hayes from United States Special Operations Command. Media representatives lined the edges of the formation, documenting an event that would be referenced in military academies for decades to come. Maya wore her dress blue uniform with the precision that had defined her entire military career. The Silver Star Medal rested in its presentation case, awaiting the moment when Admiral Morrison would pin it to her chest in recognition of gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. But Maya's attention was focused on the 3 men standing in the front row of the formation: Morrison, Turner, and Santos. Her teammates from Bravo Team, Admiral Morrison, approached the podium with the bearing of someone who had spent 30 years in naval special warfare operations. Her voice carried clearly across the formation as she began reading the citation that would become part of official military history. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen distinguished herself by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an opposing armed force. On the 15th of October 2018, Staff Sergeant Chen's reconnaissance team came under coordinated attack by numerically superior enemy forces in mountainous terrain in Afghanistan. Maya listened to the formal language that attempted to capture the reality of what had occurred in those mountains. Words like gallantry and intrepidity seemed inadequate to describe the tactical decisions made under extreme stress. But she understood the importance of official recognition for actions that exemplified the warrior ethos. When her team became pinned down by enemy fire, Staff Sergeant Chen maneuvered to eliminate a crew-served weapon position threatening her teammates. During this movement, she was severely wounded by an enemy rocket-propelled grenade that shattered her right arm and separated her from her primary weapon. The citation continued with clinical precision, documenting each phase of the engagement: Maya's adaptation to left-handed combat, her systematic elimination of enemy fighters, her prevention of the final assault on her teammates' position. But Maya knew that no formal document could capture the psychological transformation that occurred when everything you thought you knew about your limitations was proven wrong. Despite her severe injuries and being armed only with her sidearm, Staff Sergeant Chen engaged and eliminated 14 enemy combatants over a 2-hour period, including precision shots at ranges exceeding normal pistol capabilities. Her actions directly prevented the overrun of her team's defensive position and enabled the successful completion of their mission. Admiral Morrison paused in her reading, looking directly at Maya with an expression that conveyed both professional respect and personal admiration. Staff Sergeant Chen's extraordinary heroism, selfless service, and tactical excellence under the most adverse conditions reflect great credit upon herself, the United States Navy, and the United States of America. As Admiral Morrison pinned the silver star to Maya's uniform, Maya felt the weight of recognition for actions that had seemed, in the moment, like simple tactical necessities. The medal represented not just her individual performance, but the broader principle that properly trained warriors could overcome any obstacle through skill, determination, and absolute commitment to their teammates. The ceremony concluded with a reception where Maya was approached by dozens of military personnel, defense contractors, and military historians who wanted to understand the technical aspects of her engagement. Maya answered their questions with characteristic precision, focusing on training methodologies and tactical principles rather than the dramatic elements that had captured media attention. Petty Officer Morrison approached Maya during the reception, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the slight smile that had become his trademark since their return from Afghanistan. "You know," he said, handing her one of the cups, "I've been thinking about that 150-meter pistol shot you made to take out the RPG gunner." Maya accepted the coffee and waited for Morrison to continue, knowing that he had been analyzing every aspect of their engagement with the thoroughness that defined his approach to military operations. The ballistic calculations alone should have made that shot impossible, Morrison continued. "But I think I understand now why it worked. You weren't shooting at the limits of your equipment. You were shooting at the limits of what people believed was possible." Maya considered Morrison's observation while watching Santos and Turner engaged in animated conversation with a group of SEAL instructors near the buffet table. Both men had fully recovered from their wounds and returned to operational status. But the engagement in Afghanistan had changed their perspective on what constituted normal military performance. "Maybe the real lesson," Maya replied, "is that we set our own limits. The weapon didn't change. The ammunition didn't change. The target didn't change. What changed was my understanding of what was necessary." Morrison nodded slowly, understanding the deeper implications of Maya's words. "Command is already incorporating your engagement into the advanced marksmanship curriculum. They're calling it adaptive shooting under extreme stress. Every SEAL trainee is going to study what you did." Maya felt a mixture of pride and responsibility at the news. If her actions could contribute to better training that might save lives in future conflicts, then the pain and struggle of that day in Afghanistan would have additional meaning beyond her team's survival. Commander Hayes approached their conversation, carrying official papers that Maya recognized as transfer orders. Staff Sergeant Chen. House began with a formal tone that indicated official business. "You're being offered a position as an instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command. You'll be developing curriculum for combat marksmanship under adverse conditions." Maya accepted the orders and scanned the details quickly. The position would allow her to pass along the lessons learned from her engagement to the next generation of special operations personnel. It was an opportunity to ensure that future warriors would be better prepared for the kind of impossible circumstances she had faced. "I accept the position, ma'am," Maya replied, understanding that her military career was transitioning from operations to education, but with the same underlying mission, ensuring that American warriors possessed every possible advantage when facing enemies of the United States. As the reception continued around her, Maya looked out toward the Pacific Ocean and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The mountains of Afghanistan had tested every aspect of her training, her character, and her understanding of what was possible under extreme circumstances. She had entered those mountains as a highly trained Navy SEAL. She was leaving this ceremony as something more. A warrior who had proven that the human spirit, properly prepared and absolutely committed, could overcome any obstacle and achieve any objective. The lesson wasn't just about marksmanship or tactical adaptability. It was about the fundamental principle that had guided her entire military career: There are no limits except those we accept. And true warriors never accept limits when their teammates' lives depend on exceeding them. Maya Chen had redefined what was possible for a wounded warrior with a broken arm and an empty rifle. Now she would spend the rest of her career teaching others to redefine what they believed was possible for themselves. What do you think separates ordinary soldiers from warriors who achieve the impossible when everything goes wrong? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to exceed your own limits to protect something important? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Every story of overcoming limitations inspires others to push beyond what they thought was possible. If this story reminded you that the strongest weapon any warrior carries is an unbreakable spirit, smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss another mission. Share this with someone who needs to remember that there are no limits except those we accept. Your next impossible mission is already queued up on your screen. Go tackle it now. See you tomorrow for another story of warriors who refuse to surrender. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.